If you go to Mattmark today, it's a place of just absolute peace. You drive up into the Sauce Valley in Valais, and you find this huge, really tranquil lake held back by Europe's largest earth embankment dam.
It's an incredible piece of engineering. It's 120 meters high, almost 800 meters long.
And it's a cornerstone of our energy infrastructure.
Right, absolutely. That one dam produces enough electricity every single year to power well over 150,000 Swiss households. I mean, it provides genuine comfort and stability for the country.
But when you stand there looking at that calm water, you're looking at a history that is, well, it's deliberately silent. It's a story that the tourist brochures certainly don't mention.
It's a silence that has surrounded the single worst workplace disaster in modern Swiss history for 60 years.
Let's put a date on it.
The catastrophe happened on August 30, 1965. At 5:45 in the evening, 88 people died, just swept away by a wall of ice and rock in less than 30 seconds.
And what's so shocking, and what we really need to get into today, is what came after. You have a 7-year investigation. You have Dixep people accused of negligent homicide.
But the result was a general acquittal. 0 condemnations. The official apology from the Canton of Valais, the first time they ever admitted any error, only came 60 years later, in August of 2025.
That judicial paradox it's just staggering.
It is. And to really understand why that injustice was allowed to happen, we have to step back. We need to look at the huge national push for hydroelectric power right after the Second World War.
Right. The whole context of the era.
Post-WWII, Switzerland had a real strategic problem. It didn't have significant mineral resources like coal or oil, not like its neighbors.
Yeah.
So the national strategy became investing massively in what they called white coal hydroelectric power.
And the mountains in Valais were the obvious place to do that.
Exactly. It was seen as this low-cost, strategic way to get energy independence and really drive economic development.
So of all the valleys, all the mountains, why Mattmark? Why was that specific location chosen for such a huge national project?
Well, the story really goes back to the Allalin Glacier itself. If you look back, say, to the Little Ice Age, the glacier pushed all the way down to the valley floor.
And that would have blocked the river.
It did. It created a massive glacial lake. And this lake would periodically burst, causing these brutal, devastating floods down the valley. We have records of 26 of these major floods happening between 1589 and 1850.
So the danger was known for centuries.
Oh, absolutely. And to solve that, in 1926, they built a huge drainage gallery on the side of the valley. It worked perfectly. It diverted the water, the lake couldn't form anymore, and the old flood danger was gone.
But in fixing one problem, it sounds like they created the perfect conditions for another one.
That's the fatal paradox at the heart of this story. Before 1926, the glacier's end, its terminus, was supported by that natural barrier of water and ice at the bottom.
It had a foundation.
It had a foundation. Once the water was gone and the glacier naturally retreated over the next few decades, that enormous tongue of ice was just left hanging there, completely unsupported on a very steep and unstable slope.
And this instability was known.
It was known, and yet the authorities chose to build the Mattmark Dam directly under that unstable glacier tongue.
Why on earth would they do that?
Ironically, for protection. The idea was that the height of the dam itself would shield the technical installations down at the bottom from any small ice falls. The protection of the project's hardware completely overshadowed the risk to human life.
And speaking of human life, building something on that scale at 2,100 meters, it must have required a huge workforce. Who was doing this work?
Switzerland simply didn't have the manpower. So like many of these big projects, it relied heavily on seasonal workers, mostly from Italy, part of a huge wave of immigration that started back in the 1880s.
And these were workers with very limited rights?
Very limited rights, and they endured what we would now consider, just deplorable working conditions.
It's important to remember the systemic issues here.
It is. Researchers like Sandro Catteson at the University of Geneva point out that this huge influx of foreign labor automatically raised the status of Swiss nationals. And to maintain that, you needed a marked difference between the groups.
A difference which translated directly into poor safety and living conditions for the immigrant workers.
Yes. The numbers from the Mattmark site itself are pretty stark. You had an average of 200 workers, but it peaked at 1,300, and they were overwhelmingly Italian seasonal workers.
And the hours they worked.
The contract was for 50 hours per week, and that included Sundays and holidays. All this often in winter temperatures that would drop to minus 30 degrees. At the time, Switzerland held the sad privilege of having the highest fatal accident rate in construction out of all the OECD countries.
So you have an inherently dangerous site, a vulnerable workforce, and a dam being built under an unstable glacier. The final fatal decision was where they put the men to sleep.
That was it. They built a whole complex for them. Dormitories, a canteen, repair shops, and they placed this entire settlement directly under the most dangerous section of the Allalin Glacier, in a location they knew was unsafe.
Why? I mean, given the accident rates, why compound the risk like that?
Purely for economic efficiency. Putting the barracks right there minimized travel time for the workers between their beds, their food, and the worksite.
It was just about productivity.
It was. Research from the UNIJ team that studied this even found they had to dig a pit to set up the barracks, specifically to prepare for potential flows, which just confirms they were fully aware of the risk, right where the men slept.
And it wasn't just a theoretical risk, there were warnings.
There were so many warnings going back decades. Engineers have been flagging the glacier's instability since the 1920s. There was an avalanche nearby in 1949 that killed about 10 people.
And then it got much closer, right on the Mattmark site itself, just a year before the main disaster.
That's right. In 1964, an avalanche hit the site, completely destroyed some barracks, and killed 2 workers. The SUVA, the Swiss Accident Insurance Fund, later noted in their archives that this event had not made things move.
Nothing changed.
Nothing changed. On top of that, between 1960 and 1967, another Kudersee workers died in separate individual accidents on the site.
14 deaths, plus the 1964 avalanche, and still no change to the safety protocols for where hundreds of men were living.
No. There was an avalanche plan drawn up in 1960, but it only covered the access road. It specifically excluded the barracks area. The UNIJ researchers concluded that the risks were known from day one, but they seem to have been of no weight in the discussions. The safety of the project always overruled the safety of the workers.
Then we get to the final days.
In the last days of August 1965, the signs became impossible to ignore. On Saturday the 28th and Sunday the 29th, rock falls and chunks of ice breaking off the glacier became much more frequent, much more intense.
The workers themselves must have been terrified.
They were. We have testimony from Ilario Bagnariol, an Italian bulldozer driver who survived. He confirmed it. He said massive blocks had already fallen on Saturday and Sunday. Colleagues were actually building a small barrier.
A barrier to protect the workers.
No, a barrier to protect the machines.
That is just the most damning detail imaginable. The men are ordered to build protection for the company's equipment, but no one thinks to issue an evacuation order for the men themselves.
That's exactly what happened. No order was given. And then, at 5:15 p.m., it all came down. An entire section of the Allalin Glacier detached. We're talking about 2 million cubic meters of ice and rock.
It's an impossible number to visualize.
Think of it as the volume and weight of about 5,000 family homes. And that entire mass fell 300 meters down the slope in about 30 seconds.
Bagnariol, the bulldozer driver, he saw it happen.
He was right there. He said, "My boss warned me by throwing a stun at me. I turned around, everything collapsed at once, and there was an enormous blast. The flow missed me by 7 meters and crushed the barracks. There was dust, everything was white. I heard the screams."
Just instantaneous.
Instantaneous destruction. The ice buried the barracks under 10 to 50 meters of debris. The official SUVA toll was 88 deaths. That's 86 men and 2 women.
And the nationalities really tell the story.
They do. 56 Italians, 23 Swiss, 4 Spanish, 2 Germans, 2 Austrians, and 1 stateless person. Ages range from just 17 years old up to 70.
And behind those numbers.
A ton of children lost a parent that day, 79.
And the timing of it. It was just before the end of the shift.
It was. If it had happened just 30 minutes later, you could have had up to 700 workers inside those barracks for their evening meal. The death toll could have been almost 10 times higher.
It's horrifying to think about. And it wasn't just the seasonal workers who were caught in this.
No, not at all. Henri Casal, the son of one of the victims, his father was a Spanish civil engineer. He was 43. He'd only been on the site for 2 hours that day just to sort out some paperwork. The son just remembers his mother telling him the news and then hearing her cry all night.
And almost immediately after the disaster, the official narrative began to form. The denial of responsibility.
It started right away. Federal Councilor Roger Bonvin, who was from Valais and had a history with the project, immediately declared it an unforeseeable natural disaster. That line was quickly backed up by Professor Gerald Schnitter from ETH Zurich.
But how could they possibly claim it was unforeseeable after decades of warnings after the avalanche the year before?
Well, this is where the conflicts of interest become really clear. Research has shown that Roger Bonvin had previously worked as an engineer for Electrowatt AG, one of the main companies involved in the dam's planning.
So he had a vested interest in that narrative.
He did. And Professor Schnitter also held positions that put him in a clear conflict of interest. So very quickly, the official story was set in stone by powerful people.
Despite that, there was still a formal investigation.
There was, and it dragged on for 7 years, from 1965 until Septembre 2. In the end, 17 people were charged with negligent homicide. High officials, engineers, a glaciology professor, even staff from SUVA.
And the trial itself.
It finally happened in the spring of Septembre 2 in Viège. After only 4 days of deliberation, the verdict came back. A general acquittal for all 17 of the accused. The court's justification, 82 pages long, just concluded that the collapse was not foreseeable.
The system protecting itself.
It seems so. We even know that it caused a crisis of conscience for the judge. Thomas Bergener, the son of the presiding judge, later confirmed his father is deeply affected by it, that he believed a great injustice had been done. He said the court was under strong political pressures from the electric industry executives.
The families tried to appeal, didn't they?
They did, along with the prosecutor. But the cantonal court in Sion confirmed the acquittal later that year, in Septembre 2.
And then came the final, unbelievable insult.
The ultimate humiliation. The victims' families who had joined the case as civil parties, they are ordered to pay 50% of the legal costs.
They lost their loved ones, they were denied justice, and then they were handed a bill for seeking it.
It speaks volumes about how those workers' lives were valued. The reaction abroad, especially in the Italian press, was one of pure indignation. Here in Switzerland, the media was a bit more subtle, as you'd expect.
But it did spark protests.
It did. In March, Septembre 2, hundreds of foreign workers demonstrated in Geneva. Their slogan was, "Justice for the victims of Mattmark," and they were protesting what they called the contempt for workers' lives.
So after the court case, the chapter is closed, and the long silence begins.
The silence, and a very slow process of memorialization. In 1967, 2 years later, they just put a simple list of the victims' names inside the church in Saint Miguel.
And a proper official monument at the site.
That didn't come until Huitantissink,
Yeah.
1985, a full 20 years after the catastrophe. Before that, there were only a few small, private plaques left by the families themselves.
20 years.
That 20-year delay it's very telling. The unit's researchers argue it reflects a real difficulty on the part of the authorities to recognize the contribution of these immigrants and the sacrifice they made building the country.
And this was all happening against the backdrop of a growing anti-immigrant sentiment in Switzerland.
Exactly. We can't forget that just 2 months before the Mattmark disaster, a Zurich party launched an anti-foreign overpopulation initiative. And that was followed by the incredibly divisive Schwarzenbach initiative in Septembre in 1970. So the same workers building Switzerland's future were being targeted politically.
But the disaster did eventually lead to some positive changes, didn't it?
It did, slowly. It led to the creation of a permanent Italo-Swiss Accident Prevention Commission. And the unions say Mattmark was a major catalyst for the federal law on professional accidents that passed in Huitantissink, 1984. That law dramatically improved safety norms.
Which brings us to the 60-year anniversary on August 30th, 2025. That was the turning point.
It was. For the first time, you had high-level representation there. The Swiss and Italian foreign ministers, cantonal officials. It was a major event.
And it was the moment the official narrative finally broke.
It was. The state council president, Matthias Reynard, delivered the official apology. And he was blunt. He said, "The management of this tragedy was disastrous. It is the canton of Valais that bears responsibility. We recognize your suffering. We recognize our errors. And we affirm that your memory is also ours."
Hearing the word errors after 60 years of unforeseeable natural catastrophe must have been a powerful moment.
It was everything. 88 people died building our national comfort. The trial ended with no convictions, and their families had to pay court costs. It's a history we have to own.
Which forces us to look at today. How are the conditions on major construction sites in Switzerland now?
Well, they're vastly improved, of course. The law from Huitantissink sets strict norms, but the danger hasn't vanished. The unions still point to persistent risks. In 2014, for example, 23 people still died on Swiss construction sites.
So what are the new risks?
Unions talk about immense pressure from labor shortages and really tight deadlines, which creates a temptation to cut corners on safety.
And then there's the big one. climate risk. The same kind of geological instability that caused the Mattmark disaster is now being amplified by warming temperatures.
Yes, our glaciers are becoming more and more precarious. The glacier collapse at Blatten, also in Valais, in May of 2025, was a very stark reminder of that. It shows how quickly the mountains can still turn deadly.
It really feels like Mattmark teaches us that behind every piece of infrastructure that gives us comfort, every dam, every tunnel, there are people who took incredible risks.
And that the duty of memory isn't just about the past. It has to be a duty of vigilance for the future.
So today, you can go to Mattmark. It's a place for hiking, for tourism. It's a symbol of comfort and clean energy with a quiet memorial on its edge.
And the question that leaves us with is, how do we as a nation that was built on this kind of labor make sure that the people who continue to build the foundations of our national comfort don't end up paying the ultimate price for it?